Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be showing you a week of sourdough for my family of 7. I'm going to be including how I maintain my starter without any discard, as well as how I bake my sourdough without using a scale, and for most of my breads and stuff without even using a recipe. If that sounds interesting to you, then I'd love to have you stick around. So right now it is about 1:30 on Sunday afternoon. I pretty much follow the same schedule in terms of time frame for when I feed my starter, when I bake my doughs, and that kind of stuff, just because it takes out the guesswork. I know my starter, I know how long things typically take, and that is one of the biggest things with sourdough, in my opinion, is just getting to know your own starter. You can read all kinds of articles, you can watch videos and get ideas, but one of the most helpful things is just trial and error and learning to know your sourdough. So for my starter, it is typically about 4.5 to 5.5 hours after I feed it to where it is activated and ready to use. So I store my starter in the refrigerator. I just pulled it out. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the camera around so I can show you what it looks like when I just pulled it out of the fridge, as well as what it looks like as I feed it with water and flour so that it will activate today. So I love this jar. I love the latch it's got. It is just, I don't know, I really like it. I'll try to find it and link it down below in my description box for you guys. Here's what it looks like just having come out of the fridge. There's not a lot in there. I'm going to start by turning on my filtered water here and just add a little bit for starters. Then I will use my fork and I will get that mixed in a little bit. Wow, shouldn't be doing that with my left hand. I'll get this mixed in and then I'll add a little flour and then I'll add a little more water and then a little more flour. For tonight, I'll be making 2 loaves of bread. So I know that for that amount of starter, I will be needing about 1/2 cup of flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit here. And then I guess that was most of it, but I'll go ahead and mix it. See if I need more water. I'll probably need a bit more before I add the rest. I know there are all different kinds of consistencies. What's the term for it? Hydration. Less hydrated, more hydrated. Honestly, I don't fully know. Like, I know kind of what that means, but I'm not into the technicalities of sourdough. I'm into keeping it simple. Ma Ingalls is my inspiration. If she could do it without a scale and without fancy gadgets, then I can too. But for me, I like my starter to be pretty thick. I like it to pretty much be a thick pancake batter type of consistency. So not this thick. It doesn't usually take me quite as long when I have 2 hands, but that's all right. Oops, we'll get it done. Let's see how this is looking. I think that's looking pretty good. And then I will just leave it on the counter for however long it takes till it's ready. Now, because my starter is not super old, I started about 6 months ago, I don't expect it to double, but I will know it's ready based on what it looks like, and I will of course show you that when we get there. So I will be back in a few hours. And I probably should say, so after I finish mixing it in, I do close it off. I've seen different things about whether you leave it open or put a paper towel on it or whatever, but for me, I just leave it like that and I leave it on the counter, and we'll be back in a few hours. Okay, it is just past 5:30, so it's been a little over 4 hours since I fed my starter, which is a bit on the low end, but it looks ready. And as I mentioned, my starter does not typically double, so I don't normally do the rubber band trick just because I know that it doesn't usually double. I know to go by what it looks like and the time, but just to show you guys, this is where it was at when I fed it, and then it got a little higher, but it certainly did not double. So I go by what it looks like. And you know, I'm not really sure why it doesn't double. It might be because, like I said, it's kind of newer. I only started about 6 months ago. It might be the way I store in the fridge and don't do like the normal discard feed thing. I'm not sure, but the thing is, I don't really care because it works how I do it. And I'm all about keeping it simple and not having to be complicated or complex, so I don't need to troubleshoot what could be problems when it's working for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and angle the camera so I can show you what I'm doing and show you what my starter looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna try to show you guys what the starter looks like. Hopefully you get a decent angle in there. It's nice and bubbly. I probably could have let it go for another 30 minutes to an hour, but timing just worked out. If you're not sure, one of the things you can do to make sure your starter is ready is what's called the float test. Just get a little bit of your starter, put it in some water, and if it floats, it is activated and ready to use. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it is floating at the top of my water here. But like I said, I've gotten to know my starter quite well, so I don't typically do that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and fill up some water in my liquid measuring cup. I'm going to do about 2.5 cups for now. What I'm making is a double batch of loaf bread. I don't know why I can't think of what people normally call it, but just bread in a regular loaf pan. So kind of my typical rough amounts for a single loaf of bread is 3 to 3.5 cups of flour, half a cup of starter, and however much water that takes, which is typically maybe 1 1/4, 1 1/3. I don't measure things real well. Here's my first half cup starter. Since I'm doing 2 loaves, I will do 2 of these for a total of 1 cup. Sometimes if I have enough starter in here, just for fun, I'll throw a little extra in, just to spice things up. And then I'm going to set my starter aside for now, and then later I will just stick it back in the refrigerator. So once I've got my water and my starter in here, I just give it a little mix. So I have 2.5-ish cups of water and just over a cup of sourdough. So since I am doing 2 loaves, I want to aim for at least 6 cups of flour, 7 cups at most. So I'm gonna go ahead and do my first 2 cups, and I don't measure it real exact, I just get my scoop. Here's my first 2, and I'm gonna do those, and then I will mix it in. And then I'll add a couple other things. So I basically do a little flour, mix it up real well, add some more flour, mix it up real well as it just gets thicker and thicker. And then I do add my olive oil. I do roughly a tablespoon-ish. And then I also do honey. I love adding honey to my breads. I usually do a similar amount as I do the olive oil. This is a little low this time just because my container there is running out. And then I add some more flour and I keep mixing it up. Eventually I get to the point where I do mix it with my hands just because that's good easier. But for now I'm still using the wooden spoon. I do about a tablespoon of salt for a double batch of bread and get that mixed in really well. Keep going with the flour. I think I ended up getting right around 6.5 cups of flour for this batch, and then I did add a little bit more water, probably just a tablespoon or 2, because I wanted to make sure I got as much flour as I wanted to be enough for 2 loaves of bread. At this point, it is getting a little hard to keep mixing with the wooden spoon, so I go ahead and got just a little bit of the loose pieces off of that and started mixing it with my hands. Now, I'm not doing a purposeful kneading right here. I'm just trying to get that flour mixed in really well so there's no dry spots and also enough flour mixed in so it's not super sticky. I do typically like to have a thicker dough, especially for my sandwich bread, so that's why this kind of kneading in the flour is very helpful for that. The more flour I can get worked into it now, the easier it'll be when I knead it in about an hour, though by no means do I try to get as much as I can into it. I'm gonna call that good. I will leave it like that, get a towel to put over it, and I will let it sit on the counter. Ideally 1 hour, but if I have to do it a little sooner, 45 minutes is okay. If I let it sit an hour and a half, that's fine too, but I will just let it sit here, and then I will be back. All right, it has been about an hour since I finished making my dough, so at this point, I am going to go ahead and dump it out onto the counter and I will just knead it by hand for about 7 to 10 minutes or so. And before I get any further into this video, I just want to say that my goal in this video isn't to try to show you how to make the best sourdough or the best sourdough routine to follow or anything like that. My goal here is that I want to show you that sourdough is a lot simpler than a lot of people make it sound. You know, I've watched so many videos and read recipes where they talk about the measuring of it, about the importance of how you have to use a kitchen scale because the amounts, it's so important to have the amounts right, and that's just not true. But sourdough is so much more forgiving than that. I mean, think about it. People have been baking sourdough for thousands of years before they had any of the modern kitchen gadgets that we use today. My motto is, if Ma Ingalls could do it, then so can I. Especially since she did not even have a modern oven that you can set the temperature to. All right, it has been about 7 or 8 minutes at this point. It's looking and feeling pretty good, so I will let it sit here on the counter for just a minute or two while I wash out my bowl and get it ready to put in for its overnight proofing. All right, I've got my bowl all cleaned and dried. I like to spray it with avocado oil. Olive oil also works just fine, but I like this one because in the spray bottle it is very easy to do the right amount without doing too much. So just a nice layer of oil in there. Then I get this picked up. Sometimes if I let it sit too long, it does start to stick to the counter a little, but they're not too bad. I set that there. I'm going to get this towel wet and rig it out real well and put this damp towel on top of it so that it does not dry out, as it will be sitting in this bowl for probably the next 11 to 13 hours, just depending on how it looks when I get up. Typically, I like to put my dough in the oven overnight, as I find that it's less likely to dry out. Even with this on, we live in the South, and so we have the air conditioning running most of the day and night, and it gets kind of dry in here. But right now, my oven's still a little warm from cooking dinner, so I will just leave this here for 12 hours or so, and we will check in on it in the morning. All right, it is just past 7 in the morning, which is a little late for me, but I slept in a bit because it is Labor Day. My husband's off work. It looks pretty good. I could definitely let it go longer if I wanted, but to me, as I can tell that the kind of consistency of it is right. I can see some bubbles, and the size of it is good. So I'm going to take this. I've got my 2 loaf pans buttered and ready to go. I prefer using butter over oil. I just think it works better and you get a nice little butter taste to it. Who doesn't love that? So I'm gonna take it over here. I'm going to start by adding a little flour to my counter. I will separate this out into 2 loaves. One of them I'm just doing a regular sandwich loaf, and the other I am doing cinnamon swirl. For my cinnamon swirl bread, I use about 1/4 to 1/3 cup of sugar, about 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, and I also put in 2 teaspoons or so of flour. I just find that it helps it stick to the bread better. Then I go ahead and separate my dough in halves, put half aside for the regular sandwich loaf, and I start rolling out my cinnamon swirl loaf. I like to get it really long, probably at least 20 to 22 inches, maybe 8 inches wide or so, and then I just go ahead and spread out my cinnamon swirl mixture evenly all over. As I finished this off, I realized it looked a little sparse, so I added just probably about another tablespoon and a half of sugar with a little bit of cinnamon. Then I roll it up as tightly as I can, and I actually don't fold over the ends at all because I like to leave it as it is so that your end pieces still get some of that yummy cinnamon swirl. Then I cover it up to rest and rise for a little bit more. And then for my regular sandwich loaf, I just kind of push it down with my hands, fold it over, and then roll it up and stick it right back in the bread pan. And then I'll put the damp towel back on it before I stick it in the fridge for however long until I decide to bake it. All right, it has been about 1.5 hours since this has been rising here. It's gotten a little puffy, probably almost 1 inch, not quite, above the rim here. Honestly, it could go for a little longer sitting here, but I'm excited to get it baked, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in the oven. I do like to preheat my oven to 450, and then once I put it in, I do put it down to 350. It just gives it a little boost of rising when you preheat it extra hot. So that's a little high, but it'll be fine there. So I'm gonna go ahead and now set it to 350. And I find that 48 minutes, I know that's weirdly exact, but that for me is perfect. So I will go ahead, set that, and I will be back when it's done. I pulled it out right at 48 minutes and it smelled so good. Honestly, one of the hardest parts with fresh homemade bread, especially the cinnamon swirl bread, is letting it sit in the pan and sit on the counter before you dig into it. Ready? Huh? I struggled a bit with my butter because it wasn't quite soft enough, but I like to slather it on because it's just so good, and grass-fed butter is so good for you. Delicious. All right, it is almost 12 on Wednesday, and all I'm doing today for sourdough is baking this second loaf of sandwich bread that I made the dough of, when was it? Yesterday. I started Monday? Anyways, so I just pulled it out of the fridge. It was in the fridge for about, oh boy, you'll probably know better than me from watching the video, but I think it was in there for over 24 hours. Typically, when I put breads in the fridge like this, anywhere from hours to 3 days or so is, for me, the window I like to stay in. I think I've gone a little past 3 days before. So if I have to, 4 days, not a huge deal, but I do find it to be best in the 1 to 3 day range. So just pulled it out. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this around so I can show you what it looks like. I will let it sit here on the counter for as long as it takes the oven to preheat. I can do the same thing that I did with the cinnamon swirl loaf and preheat it to 450. As soon as it's preheated, I will put it down to 350 and put this in. I don't need to let it sit here very long because, as you can see, it did get puffy and rise a good bit in the fridge over the last day, but I will keep it covered with this damp towel so that it does not dry out. The regular sandwich loaf does not take quite as long to bake, although I ended up setting it for 47 minutes instead of 48, which is kind of silly, I realize, because that's hardly a difference. But anyways, that's what I did. I baked it for 47 minutes. All right, the timer just went off. I'm gonna grab this out. It looks good. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna use this for yet. Ooh, this is gonna be hard. Oh, I can't do that. I gotta put this down for a minute. Yeah, that could have been dangerous. Anyways, it looks great. I'm not sure what I'm using this for yet. I am planning on having it for dinner, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna do grilled cheese sandwiches or maybe bacon and egg sandwiches. But anyways, this will be part of our dinner tonight. All right, it is Wednesday afternoon, just past 2 o'clock. I just got my starter out to feed it again and get it activated. I did end up using the sandwich bread that I made yesterday to do grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, which was so good. But we finished that off, so I'm gonna make up some new bread. I'm gonna feed this, have it activated probably in 4.5, 5 hours, and then I'm gonna make some dough for hamburger buns as well as a rustic loaf. Both those recipes are basically the same, so I can just do a double batch and then kind of split it up after it does the bulk rise. So I'm basically going for the same amount that I did last time because I'm also doing a double batch. So pretty much a little water, a little flour, a little water, a little flour, until I have about half a cup of flour in my starter. We're gonna call that good. I'm gonna close up the lid, let it sit on the counter, and I will be back this evening. All right, my starter is looking good. It is almost 8 o'clock, which is actually a little later than I meant to get to this. Now you'll notice it is there's probably a term for that, just like the light, airy bubbles on top. I don't know what you might call that, but to me, I feel like that's a sign of it being a little on the edge of when to use it, but I've done it when it looks like this and it's just been just fine. Anyways, it looks pretty good, so it'll be just fine. I am going to do my double batch of rustic loaf and some hamburger buns. The recipes, like I said before, are pretty much the same. It's actually very similar to my other bread I made. Really the only difference is that there's no oil in it. So I just poured in, I think it was almost 2.5 cups of water. Now I'm gonna do about a cup of starter. I did just get some golden wheat flour from the store the other day. I really like adding wheat flour to my breads and stuff. The last one I didn't because I just didn't have any yet. I've never used golden wheat flour before, so I'm not 100% sure what's different about it or if I'm gonna notice anything different, but it's what the store had and it looked kind of cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a cup of that. Ooh, splattered. And I'm sorry for all the kids in the background you've probably been hearing. I actually have 5 young kids, 8 and under, that I homeschool, and that is my typical content on my channel is homeschooling stuff. So if that kind of stuff is interesting to you, then I'd love to have you stick around and subscribe to my channel. And I did just add about a tablespoon of salt and about a tablespoon of honey. Gonna get one more cup of flour, cup number 5 mixed in, and then I'll probably do a little bit of mix with my hands. Now with this dough, I will do the stretch and fold method instead of kneading it to strengthen the gluten. And so I am fine with it being a little looser dough since I don't have to worry about needing to knead it and it being really sticky and that kind of stuff. And I'm not 100%, but I think another kind of symptom of my starter being a younger starter is a little stickiness. I think as it gets older, it won't be as sticky. I'm not 100% certain, so if you know, you can tell me in the comments, but that's just kind of what I'm guessing. So anyways, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and get this off. Ooh, that's actually quite sticky. I'm gonna add another one. This will be number 6. Let's just do half for now. Get that mixed in. So basically the only difference between this dough and the sandwich dough is there's no oil in this dough. So I'm not really purposefully kneading it right now. I'm just trying to get that flour mixed in. I think I'll go ahead and, well, we'll see how it looks after I get this mixed in a little better. All right, that's looking just about right. Like I said, it's not quite as thick and it's a little stickier than my last dough, but since it is a different bread, that is fine. I'm gonna go ahead and just leave it like that. I will cover it with a towel, get these little scraps off my hands, and let it sit for about an hour on the counter, and then I will do my first stretch and fold. All right, it's been about 45 minutes, which is a little less time than I typically do, but it's getting late, and so I kind of wanted to nudge it up a little bit. I like to get my hand a little wet before I stretch and fold. You can see it's definitely a little sticky, so it's gonna be sticky, that's all right. I just kind of scoop out under it, pull up, and then fold over, turn it quarter turn, same thing, pull up and over. Number 3. And as I do these, it'll get a little less sticky each time. My goal is to do 3 stretch and folds tonight, but we'll see how late I stay up. Definitely 2 is my minimum. At most, if I have time, sometimes I will do 4, but 3 is the average. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover that back up and let it sit here for another 30 minutes or so, and then I will do the next stretch and fold. It is 9:30 now. I'm not sure what happened to the time, but I am tired, so I'm going to just do one last stretch and fold. Don't normally just do 2, but I have done it before, so I'm not too worried about it. Just grab this. I will get my towel nice and damp and cover it with that, and then I will let it sit out either on the counter or on the oven until tomorrow morning, and then we will check in and see if it is ready for the next step right away or if it needs a little more time when I get up. But we are gonna call that good for now, and it'll work. All right, this morning I woke up and it was not quite, hadn't risen enough, wasn't bubbling enough, so I put the light on in the oven and then I forgot about it. And now it is just about 10 o'clock and it's looking really good. It's got some bubbles in here, the size is good. It's sticking to the towel a little bit, but that's okay. But anyways, I'm actually just gonna keep this exactly like this. Don't mind my toddlers in the background. And I'm going to put it in the refrigerator for a couple hours, and then I will take it out and I will shape it into the rustic loaf and the burger buns that I will cook TBD. All right, it's about 1:30, so my dough has been in the refrigerator for about 3.5 hours. Quick math. Gosh, I hope I did that right. But, ooh, wow, this looks really good. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the camera turned around so you can see it. We've got beautiful big bubbles in it. It got nice and big. It is very airy and fluffy. Look at that bubble there. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to separate it out half and half so that I can make my rustic loaf as well as some hamburger buns. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of pour it out. I'll have to use my hand a little bit to get along the edges. Not a big deal at this point for the bubbles to break because they are all gonna get kind of smushed as I handle my dough. But this is why I love doing the refrigerator. It just makes your dough so much easier to handle, especially when it is on the little sticky side. If it's cold like this, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure the science behind it, but I know it makes it so much easier to handle. So when I can, I typically do put my dough in the fridge. So I'm gonna use this little nifty tool, which is actually a pizza cutter, and just go as 50-50 as I can. And I'm gonna take the one that looks a little bigger and do that for my rustic loaf. I don't have that big of a process with this. I just kind of flatten it out a little bit, fold it over, and then I kind of push it down as I roll it. And then I'm going to put it in my Banneton basket, where I do need to add a little bit of flour to that so it doesn't stick when I try to get it out. All right, and then I just kind of try to get that seam down a little bit. And then I put it in upside down, and here I will put it in a large Ziploc bag, and then I'm gonna put this back in the fridge, and I believe I will bake it tomorrow. So at this point, sometimes I do just a couple hours in here, sometimes I do a day or two, but I try not to do more than 3 days at this point. All right, so I've got the other half. I'm going to make 6 hamburger buns with this. So with this, I just kind of, again, not anything too specific, just kind of roll them over till they get a nice little ball like that. And then I will put it on my baking sheet. And then I'll move on to the next, just kind of, basically I'm wanting the seams to be all at the bottom. And I kind of try to roll it as much as I can so that the seams do get worked in a little bit and keeping it as round. It is still a little sticky, but nothing I can't work with. And these I will cover back up with the damp towel, let them sit on the counter for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. If I was short on time, I could do an hour, but 2 to 3 hours is ideal, just so that they get a little bigger and just start to look a little puffy again, so where you kind of see some of those air bubbles. And then the first few times I made these, they got really tall. So I've learned that I do like to kind of push them down a little bit. This part's hard because it is sticky. I could probably use some kind of kitchen tool that might be easier, but it's all right. I just give them a small smooshy. Ew. There's something that's just almost, I don't know, therapeutic about handling dough. There's something about just having your hands in the dough that's just, I don't know, it's grounding or something. But those look pretty good. I'm gonna get my towel back on. It's still pretty damp from earlier, so I don't need to re-wet it. I will do like so, stick it out of the way, and leave it for a couple hours, and I'll be back when they're ready to go in the oven. All right, I am gonna go ahead while I'm at it, feed my starter again, in case you've lost track like I almost have. It is currently, yeah, I definitely lost track. Thursday. It is Thursday afternoon, 1:45 o'clock. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed this again. Start with some water. I'm gonna do pretty much the same rough amounts of water and flour. Tonight, I'm going to make dough for pizza, that we will have for dinner tomorrow, Friday night. And I'm gonna make a double batch of pizza dough so that I can have enough for tomorrow night and then some for the weekend or whenever. The pizza dough is just fine in the fridge, like most of these things, easily for 2, 3, even 4 days. So when I can, I like to make extra to stock up for later. I'm gonna add the last little bit, it'll probably only be like 2 tablespoons at this point, of my golden wheat flour instead of the all-purpose. So I'll do a tiny bit more water, mix that in. And then this timing should work out well for me to make the dough around 6:30 or maybe close to, I don't know, somewhere between 6:30 and 7. All right, it is about 4 o'clock, so it has been roughly 2.5 hours. Oh my goodness, it's stuck. Isn't that the worst when it's stuck and you don't know how you're gonna get it out without breaking the egg? I like legitimately can't get it out, so I might have to put the phone down and see what we can do. The egg is literally stuck to this. I had to pull this out and the egg's already cracked a little bit, so I'm gonna have to just like, I don't know. There we go. Anyways, I'm doing this for the egg wash. What a mess. It's a good thing that was the last egg in this carton because it's, yeah, going in the trash. There we go. Worked well enough. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this up for an egg wash. I'm gonna add just a very small amount of water to it, something like a teaspoon, tablespoon. All that good. And then I will brush this on my buns. I give each of the buns just a small brush of the egg wash. This helps them to brown nicely when they bake. And then after I do the egg wash, I like to put a little seasoning salt on them. I have one that is called Herbamare, I think, or something like that. It's just a blend of different seasonings and it makes it taste so good. All right, the buns are done, and it is smelling so good in here. Oh, got a little steamy there, but those look good. I always like to kind of test the bottom. Perfect. Yeah, they feel good, they look good, and they smell good. Here is the final product with bacon, pickled onions, homemade barbecue sauce, and they were so good. Here I'm starting my pizza dough for Friday evening. It is currently Thursday evening around 7 o'clock or so. And I don't know if a pizza dough recipe is typically different than a sandwich bread recipe, but for me, I pretty much do them the same ingredients and kind of the same amounts. I am doing the double batch here so that I have leftovers for later. So I'm doing my flour. I did do, I think it was a cup of the whole wheat flour. I did my tablespoon or so of olive oil, tablespoon or so of honey, as well as a tablespoon or so of salt. I'm actually a little curious now if most recipes have those being the same amounts. And honestly, I don't measure them, so I don't know if they're the same amounts, but it feels like pretty similar amounts for all of those. So I've got all those ingredients in. I've done a few cups of flour at this point. I lost track of what I'm at, but I did end up getting something around 6.5 cups of flour total, and then I covered it up to sit for an hour. At this point, the dough has been sitting for 1 hour, so I'm doing my first set of stretch and fold. And after this first one, I let it sit for 30 minutes, and then came back for the second stretch and fold. Then I let it sit for 30 more minutes, then I came back for the third stretch and fold. I didn't film those. This is stretch and fold number 4 that I did get to this time, and you can definitely see a difference in the dough from the first one to this one. I can definitely feel a difference. It's definitely gotten not quite as sticky. It's just feeling a lot stronger. It is just about 6 o'clock. Let's take a peek at this dough. Expect it to be kind of like yesterday.
when I looked at my last dough were not quite ready yet first thing in the morning. So let's see. It's definitely gotten a lot bigger, but it doesn't look nearly as bubbly as I want it to be. So it's gonna need a couple more hours. I'm gonna do the same thing like yesterday. I'm gonna turn the oven light on and probably give it anywhere from 2 to 4 more hours. It is 8:30, so it has been about 2.5 hours since I turned the oven light on, and wow, look at that. It is doing good. It is ready. Wow, it looks super good. It's gotten big, as you see. It's got a lot of these bubbles. You can just tell when you kind of jiggle it that it is just nice and airy. So I'm gonna do the same thing that I did last time with my dough like this. I'm just going to take it exactly as it is, take it out of here and put it in the refrigerator for a few hours. Actually, I think I'm gonna have it out for more than a few hours. I think I'll have it out until I'm ready to use it to make my pizza doughs this evening. I'm going to bake my rustic loaf today. So I just put the Dutch oven in there. Nothing's in it yet. I'm gonna preheat my oven. I'm just gonna preheat it to 375. I personally do not like my rustic loaf to be so hard that you're about to break your teeth while you're chewing on it. A little crispy, yes, but not break your teeth hard. So I'm gonna get that preheated. I just pulled this out of the fridge. I'm gonna take it out of its bag here. Now, the interesting thing is sometimes when I have this sitting in the fridge for a day or two or whatever it is, sometimes it ends up rising quite a bit more in the fridge and it's really puffy by the time I bring it out. Some days, like this time, it doesn't seem like it really rose at all, so I don't really know why. But not concerned, because this has happened before where it doesn't. And you know, actually one thing I might do though, since it really didn't rise a lot, I actually might do the whole preheat it extra high trick so that it has a burst of heat when it goes in. And then when I do bake it, I will turn it back on. So I will just leave this here as long as it takes for this to preheat. I'll give it a little extra time to get that Dutch oven. So maybe I'll give it 20 or 30 minutes before I put it in the oven. The bread is just about ready to go in. So I'm just putting it on my parchment paper and doing a little scoring. I like to get slightly fancy sometimes, but mostly it's pretty simple. After I put it in my Dutch oven, I do start it with the lid on, but I will take it off later on in the baking process. I also like to have a cooking sheet underneath it to kind of block a little bit of that heat so it doesn't get so scorched on the bottom. It has been about 25 minutes since the bread went in, and this is always the most exciting part, taking the lid off and seeing what it looks like. Sometimes it's not anything too spectacular, but other times it rises a lot or it goes kind of wonky, so it's always kind of fun to see. Ooh, looks good. I like the size. It opened up kind of a little more than I expected to. Just gonna go ahead and give it a turn. And then I probably won't keep I probably won't keep the lid off the entire time because like I said, I don't like it being super hard and crispy, but I'll leave it off for 10 to 15 minutes and then I'll check on it again. All right, the bread got finished about an hour ago. Here's our lunch. These are the kids' plates. Now I'll be getting myself a bowl or a plate in just a minute here. I didn't slice the bread super well because I don't know, it was probably closer to 30 or 45 minutes that came out of the oven. But it looks good. Haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure it will taste good. It smelled delicious, and I'm excited to dig in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and feed my starter one last time for the week. It is Friday afternoon, right around 2, my typical feeding schedule. And I'm going to feed it to make some dough tonight for a loaf of cinnamon raisin sandwich bread. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the water. I'm actually not gonna give it quite as much flour this time because I'm just gonna do a single loaf. So probably 1/2 cup of flour is about all I will need. So I'm gonna do a 1/4 cup first, get this mixed in real well, see if I need any more water, put that in, and it will be the usual around 6 to 6:30 to 7 that this will be ready to make the dough. All right, looks good. I will close it up, leave it on the counter, and be back later. All right, it is pizza time. It is
about 10 till 5 on Friday afternoon. I've got my pizza dough out, got bacon in the oven cooking to be one of my toppings, and I'm going to go ahead and separate this dough. I think it'll make 4 pizzas, 3 or 4, so I'll do 2 tonight, and then I will save the rest of the dough for sometime over the weekend. But I'm gonna go ahead and get it kind of portioned out. So I'm gonna just pour it out on the counter here. After getting it onto the counter, I divided it in half with my pizza cutter, put the 1/2 away for using later on, and then I divided that half on the counter into halves again, ended up being just the right amount. I sprayed some avocado oil on my cast iron pizza stones, and then I just worked the dough with my hands until it was nice and flat, filling the whole space. I try to do this fairly quickly because if it gets too warm, it gets sticky, harder to deal with. So I just kind of push it and go around until I get it nice and filled in the space. After I do that, I do use a fork to just do some poke holes in it. I don't know, I think it helps it bake through better when you do your par bake. I put the first dough in the oven to pre-bake, and normally I pre-bake them for 8 or 9 minutes at 450, but this one I didn't do it quite as high temperature because the bacon was still in the oven. And then after it was done, I did some seasoned butter and some homemade barbecue sauce, just a small amount because this one's for my kids and they don't like a lot of sauce. Then I did some mozzarella cheese and some Parmesan cheese. I kept this one pretty simple because, like I said, this is mostly for my kids and they kind of like it simple when it comes to toppings. Here we have our Friday night pizza dinner, and they turned out super good. It's Friday evening, and I'm starting the dough for my cinnamon raisin sandwich bread. I'm just doing a single loaf, and I am just, at this point, doing a typical sandwich bread recipe. So I did about 1.25 cups of water. I think I did like a cup of wheat flour. I did 1/2 cup of the sourdough starter, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of honey, 2 teaspoons or so of salt, got that mixed in really well. When it started getting pretty thick, I did my normal switch from the wooden spoon to using my hands and just kind of worked the flour in a kneading type way. After it sits for an hour on the counter, it is ready for the kneading, and so I go ahead and put some flour down. I start kneading it first, just without doing my add-ins. After I work a little bit of flour into it, then I add my cinnamon sugar raisin mixture, which is about 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup of sugar, about 1 tablespoon of flour. I think it was maybe 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, and 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup of raisins. It is a little bit sticky and a little hard to work in the raisins and mixture, but it's not that hard. You just kind of keep working at it and keep adding a little flour if it gets sticky and working it in until it's kind of all in there. At this point, it was starting to look and feel pretty good, so I decided to call it good. Gave some avocado oil to my bowl, put it in there, and covered it up for the night with a damp towel. All right, it is just past 9:30 on Saturday morning. This dough has been sitting, rising, whatever, for quite a while, and it has not gotten as big as I would like, even though I turned the oven on. Not the oven, but the light on. It's definitely done okay, although now I'm kind of remembering that it is just a single loaf, so obviously it wouldn't get as big as the double. But even still, not as big as I typically like to see, but I think a lot of that is because of the add-ins I have, and this is kind of how it usually goes when I do this. So I gave it probably 14 hours, and now I'm going to get it in my loaf pan that I've got buttered and ready to go. I'll probably let it sit in the oven with the light turned on for 1 to 2 hours, and then I will bake it. I put a little flour on the counter and then do a really simple little fold thingy, I don't even know what you'd call it, before I put it in my loaf pan. All right, this has not risen as much as I would like, honestly, but it's been about 1.5 hours and I'm just ready to bake it, so I'm gonna go ahead. I preheated the oven to 450. I will put it in
do the usual, lower the temp down to 350. And then set the timer for 48 minutes. And we'll see how it looks when it's done. I just pulled it out of the oven. It looks really good. As you can see, it ended up rising really nicely, even though it didn't look super great before going in. I will let it sit here in the loaf pan for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then I will pull it out and let it sit on a cutting board for, we'll see, maybe 20 minutes before I cut into it. And keep going while I butter it.
Butter, butter, butter. Butter. There she goes. Yummy, yummy.
That is going to wrap up my week of sourdough. It has been a pretty typical week in terms of how much sourdough baking I did. A little on the high end. I'd say my average is 3 or 4 loaves of bread a week. And most weeks I either do some kind of buns, hamburger buns or hot dog buns, or pizza dough, or some weeks like this week I did some buns and some pizza dough. But I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what kind of things I make with my sourdough and my schedule. This has been a little fussy today. But anyways, I hope this has been encouraging, especially to anybody that has wanted to try sourdough and hasn't quite made the leap yet. It's just not nearly as scary or intimidating, or things don't have to be as precise as a lot of people make it sound. And it really did not take very long for me when I started my starter 6 months back to really feel like I knew what I was doing and to feel like I just had a handle on it, and that it was just been a lot easier than I expected it to be. And it's been so much fun too. I do tend to do a lot of other baking for my family, and so if you enjoy seeing this kind of content, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to do more videos of what we eat in a day and stuff like that. I'm really passionate about eating healthy. I make most of my foods from scratch at home and would love to share more of that with you guys. And I'll see you next time.